Hi, everyone. Good to see you. There's a lot of people in the chat already. I'm happy to see that. Before I will talk with my guest of the day, I just wanted to quickly show everyone once again the page Victims Have Voices, which is resources if you have been victimized by Scientology in the United States. There's a page specifically made for information regarding that. So how to contact FBI, how to contact the current legal company that is giving support for victims of Scientology. And I just wanted to give it a little highlight here before I will start talking with my guest of the day, who is Mr. Mark Turi. Nice to meet you.
Same to you, Mirjam. Yeah, it's very nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes, we have not really bumped into each other before and just had a couple of minutes of short chat before. But maybe we could just start from where you're from and how did you end up in Scientology?
Well, I was born in Toronto, Canada. I'm 42 and currently living in Budapest, Hungary. But I got into Scientology in May of 2005 um, after I was on vacation in Los Angeles at that time,
Okay.
about the second week or something of 2005 in May. And
Okay.
it's kind of a long story, but essentially the highlights are that I was on Hollywood Boulevard as a tourist, and I walked into and was body routed into what's called the L. Ron Hubbard Life Exhibition, which is at
Okay.
6331 Hollywood Boulevard, right on the corner, Hollywood Boulevard and Ivar Avenue. And I had sort of tangentially heard of Scientology here and there
Mm-hmm.
before, nothing too much, although, like a few years prior, if you remember John Travolta, Battlefield Earth, and all that stuff. So I sort of
Mm-hmm.
had some rumblings of what Scientology was and so forth, but it wasn't extensive. And I went through the exhibit. I became very interested. And then, literally about 10 minutes later, as I was walking further west on Hollywood Boulevard, there used to be a test center near a street called Wilcox Avenue. Went in there. I did the OCA personality test, and I ended up buying some books. After I got home on vacation, I went to the Oregon, Toronto, and started
Okay.
there. So I was a public Scientologist for 2 years, mostly in Toronto, also in Berlin, and then I was a staff member in the New Berlin org, which is the org that they have today on Auto zur Allee. And I was about a staff member for 9 months. I spent 2.5 months in San Francisco, and I ended up leaving Scientology in May of 2008, almost 3 years to the day that I was, joined on L. Ron Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard Way, is the other street. I'm sorry, on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was basically in for about 3 years, more
Okay.
or less.
Okay. So just to go back, you went to the information center. Is that a different location than where it's currently located? I think it's been in the same
Yes, it
place.
is.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so the building, that actual building, way, way many years ago, it was a bank. It was called the Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
Guarantee Building. It's a
Mm-hmm.
historical location. And Church of Scientology must have bought it in like the early 90s.
Okay.
And on top are the offices of the Church of Scientology International, which is the
Mm-hmm.
mother church of all the what they call Class 5 orgs
Yeah.
in Scientology. So when they refer to a org or an organization, Church of Scientology, they're all Class 5 orgs.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, there's this really of course, because it was a bank, they have this high ceilings type thing, and
Mm.
it's this open area, and they put this kind of almost like a museum to
Yeah.
L. Ron Hubbard's life. Of course, most of it is BS, but
Is
this is
that
where I
where
was
they have
interested.
is that where they have like some kind of fountain and brass or like a bronze sculpture of L. Ron Hubbard's face? Is that the same location?
It might be, but I'm not
Yeah.
100. Yeah, it might be.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? It is. They actually, yes. And so
Okay.
when you go through the exhibit, you go through parts of his life, which again are all BS. But then
Mm.
once you get to the end, they tell you that L. Ron Hubbard received like hundreds of citations and all kinds of crap from from from
Yeah.
different dignitaries and leaders and cities. And there's this big wall that they open, and it's like four different walls that they open. And then, yeah, I think in the end, there's some face of Hubbard or something like
Yeah.
that. Some
Laura
pastor would
FM
say,
just said that
yeah,
that's the same place. Okay.
yeah, it
And
is.
yeah, and we are roughly the same age, so I would imagine you were in your start 20s, very impressionable, and
22. Hmm.
yeah. And what was it that attracted you into Scientology? What was it, the interest that they paid on you from from the first moment, or was it the writings of L. Ron Hubbard?
Well, the very first thing was in May 2005, I had just graduated from community college and I was studying broadcasting. And I
Hmm.
actually wanted to move to Los Angeles, even though I'm a
Yeah.
Canadian citizen. So I was finding it a bit difficult because you need a visa and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't know that at the time.
Mm.
Sometimes between America and Canada, we just figure we can just sort of do like in the EU where you just come
Yeah.
and whatever, but you can't.
Yeah.
So I was interested in just moving to Los Angeles and working in Los Angeles, and the people at the Church of Scientology of Los Angeles before it was a Sea Org, Class 5 org, which is very rare. It was a public
Mm.
sort of staff member org, and yeah, basically they said like, yeah, of course you could come to Los Angeles, you can work here, you can work what's called a foundation schedule, so evenings and weekends, and then
Mm.
during the week you can, whatever, you can work, do a 9 to 5 in a production house. They were kept saying how they had acting teachers and acting schools, and you could kind of do whatever you want. So I took it as kind of a young impressionable person. I sort of took it like as a way in, sort of like an
Yeah.
easy way in to LA, and not sort of understanding that it's a lot more difficult. And why wouldn't everybody do that if it was that easy? So
Mm.
that was that. But in addition to all of that stuff, in my personal life, I had a lot of different things hit me within about 6 months prior to me joining Scientology. So from about December of 2005 until May of 2000, December 2004 until May of 2005, like some stuff like my parents were getting divorced. So that
Mm.
was really tough. And then my grandmother died. And then I didn't have any jobs. Like I had, gone through community college and studied in the hopes that I would get work, but I was unemployed and I just wasn't feeling very well. I was kind of depressed and
Mm.
stuff. And being in California was really nice. And as I like to say, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time for them
Yeah.
to sort of pick me and say, "Oh, if you move here, we'll do all these things for you." And
Mm.
that was part of it. And then the stuff with L. Ron Hubbard and his writings and his works came later because I started doing courses. And
Okay.
like initially, I enjoyed it, but as everything went on and on and on, it became quite a hassle and really kind of a chore. So I
Okay.
sort of stopped liking that eventually.
Okay. So you returned to Canada, and did you join the Toronto org at that time then?
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct. That was my first course that I did was, yeah, in the Toronto Church of Scientology in May 2005 at the end of the
Mm.
month.
Mm. Okay. And you started to do courses, or at which point did you join staff over there?
So, well, the first thing was I was a public for 2 years. So that summer, the summer of 2005, from June, July, August, I did courses in Toronto. In September, I actually moved to Poland because I was got a job for a year there. So
Okay.
the closest org was Berlin, and they had a very small org in an area called Mariendorfer Damm, which is in the south of Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did courses there for about a year, came back to Toronto, and then ended up moving. in May of 2007, I moved to Berlin to join staff.
Okay.
And so for my first 2 years, I was either on lines at the old Berlin org or in the Toronto org. And then for that last year, again, I was on staff 2 orgs for about a year total. And that staff experience is actually really what was quite influential in uh, me leaving, as well as the
Mm,
second experience, which was in the United States in San Francisco. And
mm,
that last year really opened my eyes to a totally different life of Scientology. And
mm.
then eventually I would end up leaving, as I said, in May of 2008, after a year of being on staff and being just hassled and worked to death, and paid
Yeah.
very little, and so on.
Okay. So you were already in Germany. Did they sell you the position in staff, or did you yourself uh, want to join the staff originally? Was it something that was sold to you, or?
So again, if we go back to me being in Los Angeles in May 2005,
Mm,
they had said to me, if you come here, you can get in the United States what is called an R1 religious workers visa. And they
mm,
said, you can come out here, you can work and whatever. So I said, okay, great.
mm,
So I
yeah,
called the American embassy in Toronto, or the consulate in Toronto, and they
yeah.
said, well, there's one stipulation. You must be a member of that religion for 2 years.
Okay.
Then you can get your R1 visa and go. So
Mm,
initially, I thought about going to the United States. I was waiting for those 2 years. And then what actually happened was I did another vacation in Los Angeles in December of 2006.
mm,
And at that time, I went to the Shrine Auditorium, which is in Los Angeles, and I was there live to watch the New Year's Eve event in the
mm,
end of 2006. And they announced that the Berlin org had become an ideal org and that they had moved. And they gave
mm,
this little, puff piece about the org and so forth. And I didn't have much contact with the people that I had contact with in 2005 and six. This would have been earlier in the year, right? Early in
mm,
2006, end of 2005. And so I know that I contacted them, but I can't remember if like I don't actually recall who initiated, whether I said, "Hey, I'll come on staff because I'm looking to come on staff," or if they said, "We need staff members, so come on staff." I don't recall exactly, but
mm,
regardless, I ended up for those 5 months from December of 2006 until May of 2007. I ended up working and saving some money and then going to Berlin and then signing my contract. And in the middle of the month, it was my first week there, and I started in the middle of that month of May of 2007. And so, but again, even like that, even as a staff member, there's still numerous amounts of things that it just isn't let up as far as recruiting and signing other contracts and trying to get people on board. It's like it just never stops. It's so much
mm.
nonsense and things like this. So yeah,
But for
but again,
you,
just not able to
yeah.
recall
But
specifically.
for you, it was like part of this long game where you wanted to go to the US and get the R1 visa in order to arrive. Okay. And
Exactly,
what was,
and then I thought
yeah.
maybe I would do a 2.5-year contract and then go, like, things change, right? Like, so I was,
Mm,
planning to go to the United States, but then I'd already knew people in Berlin, and I thought, "Oh, I'll do 2.5 years there, then I'll go over," and then, that never resurfaced, thankfully, because then I was out of Scientology by then,
yeah.
so it was a
Yeah.
blessing in
What did your
disguise, as they
parents
say.
think about you joining Scientology?
My parents were like hippies in the 60s, so they've always been
Mm,
pretty open on stuff, and I've always been, bouncing back and forth into doing different things.
mm.
So and they've always been pretty supportive. I didn't know, though, so my mom told me afterwards, and my dad told me afterwards, that my dad, when he grew up, one of his best friends had a sister who was in Scientology in the 70s and 80s
Okay.
and had moved out to Los Angeles, and she was on lines for like 10 years,
Mm.
and I guess, whatever. So we had some connection. Like then there were like neighbors that we knew that had children who were Scientologists, like a few people that we knew. And so there was always, rattlings after the fact. But when I was in, my mom actually came to Berlin. My mom came to a couple events, like she was very interested and she wanted to learn, but she bit her tongue. And then as soon
Mm.
as I left, she was like unloaded everything, like, hey, for the past 3 years, here's been what I'm wanting to tell you. And
Yeah.
I also remember, this is a kind of an interesting detail, was I don't remember the exact year, but it was obviously before I left, so 2006 or 7, maybe 2008. My
Mm.
mom, my aunt, and a couple friends went to New York City, and I was encouraging them to go to the org in New York City. So they did, and apparently they just absolutely hated it because everyone was just too pushy and
Mm.
whatever. But they didn't tell me at the time. They're, oh, we had a wonderful time. Everyone was so friendly. And then whatever, a year and a half later, they were like, we hated it. The people were, terrible. They were trying to get us to,
Yeah.
buy books and whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was an interesting like couple months there where my mom was like, okay, I'm going to tell you everything that I've been, hiding for the past couple years.
Yeah. So
So it was
basically,
nice though.
yeah, you didn't get any kind of resistance from your family or anyone. So it was really really bad circumstances that led you to
Yeah,
Scientology in that sense. That there was no
yeah,
one.
it was a lot of, I mean, my parents weren't antagonistic or anything, like,
Mm.
they were supportive, but,
Mm.
it was hard because when I was in Berlin, and that was a
Yeah.
really bad experience, I was telling them what was going on, and, they didn't have much power to do anything, but it in
Mm.
the end, I think had they done too much, I would have disconnected from them. Um,
Yeah.
and so they did enough, and that's kind of the problem with Scientology. Is like if you are a parent, if you are overly concerned, your children will
Mm.
disconnect from you. You'll never see them again. But if you're a bit more reserved and like, well, it's their choice, it could lead them down some very destructive paths. And but in the end, if they do leave, it'll be a better relationship. So I understand. I'm not a parent myself, but I
Mm.
kind of understand that mentality as I'm getting older. It's like you can't make the choices for your children, but you also don't
Mm.
want them to do things that are destructive or harmful. And so
Yeah.
it's a very hard line to walk. And I don't know how to do that. But I would just say my parents were at least maybe passive in one sense, but in the
Mm.
long run, it ended up working.
Yeah.
So I was thankful for that.
Yeah. That's great. So what kind of position did you have? Did you have 2.5 year contract in Germany when you joined staff?
Yes, and I worked there. I worked first in Berlin for 9 months, and then they transferred me to San Francisco because of a visa issue, which is a whole thing.
Okay.
But initially, when I first got there in May of 2007, I was what they call a letter registrar in the Hubbard Dianetics office, or the
Mhm.
Hubbard Dianetics Center, which is part of the Division 6. And I wrote
Okay.
letters, which was absurdly ridiculous,
Mhm.
because some of the people who I was writing letters to like bought a Dianetics book literally in like the 1970s and 80s,
Yeah.
and it was ridiculous. Plus the fact that we had this huge thing happen where all the letters were being sent to the post office, but unfortunately they weren't actually being sent because no one was spending money on stamps or postage. It's ridiculous how incredibly bureaucratic and just stupid everyone is over there. But whatever. And then I got transferred to become the director of records, assets, and material, which I think is department number 9. I think, if I'm
Okay.
mistaken, that's in Treasury, division number 3. And so
Mhm.
basically, it's a mix. You're kind of like the org bookkeeper, you're the supply officer, and you're kind of a records officer at the same time.
Mhm.
So being in finance, and especially being in accounting at the church, is quite something.
Yeah.
But it's
I can
incredibly
imagine.
bureaucratic. Yeah, a lot of paperwork, incredibly bureaucratic, nightmarish at times. The worst position that I could tell you in an org, in my opinion, is the people who deliver the staff pay. And
Mm-hmm.
although we had someone who was able to do that, that person was from Kenya, and she had to leave Germany because she was working illegally. And then I took it over, and it is the worst job in the organization because, of course, nobody gets paid anything,
Yeah.
and it's just ridiculous. Now I left. I went to San Francisco from March till May of 2008. I was there for about 10 weeks, and
Mm.
I was an establishment officer, which is kind of I don't even know how you would describe it, but an establishment officer is someone who tries to make sure that policy is being established within a certain either division or department. And so you're not really producing anything, but you're kind of like going through
Enforcing.
policies.
Oh, yeah.
You're enforcing
Okay.
policy. So I
Mm.
don't know if it's like an HR thing, kind of, but not really. Um,
Okay.
Kind of like a propaganda officer, to be honest with you. If
Mm.
you think of like Soviet times or whatever, there was always
Mm.
some propaganda officer in an army unit or in an office, and they would just go up to you to motivate you to keep going, even though your job was pointless. That was kind of what an establishment officer is. So, those were my jobs, writing
Yeah.
letters, doing all the weird supply logistics work, and then a propaganda office.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. So
So
in
bizarre.
Berlin, how were you? You were in your early 20s. You were in a different country. You were having a contract for 2.5 years with
Mm,
no hardly any pay.
yep.
Did they provide some kind of help with the living arrangement over there, or where were you staying?
No, originally, yes, and then later on, no. So originally, I got placed with a young couple, um, a young German couple from Dresden, and I lived with them for, I guess, a month or something. And then,
Mm.
interestingly enough, my mom actually came to visit Berlin.
Yeah.
And she was there when they released The Basics, which was just horrible. And, we ended up finally finding an apartment because I had a couple days off. I had,
Mm.
like, 2 days off to visit with her or something, and I ended up getting an apartment. Once I got the apartment, I had a roommate that never paid rent, and so a Sea Org members came in and started paying rent to me, thankfully. But,
Okay.
yeah, it was a mess. I mean, nobody has time to do anything because we were working nonstop. Yeah, I was
Mm.
working this thing called a full-time schedule, which basically is the same almost the same hours as the Sea organization. It's like 90 plus hours a week, and
Mm.
there's no time to look for anything. So they
Yeah.
provided nothing. They didn't provide any healthcare. They didn't provide housing. They didn't provide food. They didn't provide like anything. And if they did, for example, for a few months, the Sea Org members that worked in the Berlin org did cook some food, some lunch every once in a while, but you still have to pay. And so everything is, they call it out exchange. So if you
Mm.
do something, you always have to get something back. So there's no real camaraderie or altruism in the church. It's almost like if you do something for me, I have to do something for you.
Yeah.
So you don't just give somebody any you don't just do something for free. It's not like I know in Scandinavia you have a very robust social welfare programs. Well, they don't really
Mm.
like that in Scientology because they think that people are leeching off of the system or
Yeah.
using the system when people need these things, whatever. So they're not like that. They don't really have a concept of social justice or anything like that. So it's if you do something, you have to give us money in return, or you have to work for us in return, or you have to do something in return, because otherwise there's no trust. And so that was kind of what I experienced. That, and by the way, that was part of the culture that I didn't really understand until I became a staff member, because the
Yeah.
public, you're pretty shielded from certain things, like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. How could you provide for yourself then? What did you live off? Well,
Well, I had
first.
savings. I had savings, and I was lucky enough that what I had been working, I actually did finally get jobs in working, and I saved some
Mm.
money. And so, I mean, it ran out, to be honest with you,
Mm.
after at least 6 months. And then
Mm.
I was really, it was really bad because eventually I was enough to at least pay my rent for about 6 or 7 months, The Sea Org came in, and about three Sea Org members lived at my place with myself and
Mm,
my roommate. So they were able to then pay enough for my rent. So I had only money for my food, and the money that I got from my food was literally my staff pay. So
mm,
sometimes I was living off of 14, 15 euros a week in food, and sometimes it was 25 euros or 30 euros. And I
mm,
would just divide that by 7, and I would
mm,
go, there used to be an Aldi market across the street from the Berlin org. It's now an optometrist center, but there used to be a little Aldi there, and I would, if I had 2 euros, I would just look around to see what I could buy with 2 euros, and I would just buy that, and I would just eat at lunch. I wouldn't eat any breakfast. I'd eat lunch and I wouldn't eat dinner, or I would save half of my food for lunch and eat half of it for dinner. But I basically pretty much starved. I ended up losing, I don't know how many kilos this is, but I ended up
mm,
losing somewhere between 70 and 75 pounds in the
mm.
9 months that I was on staff.
That's
So
like
that's at least
30,
30, 40
35
kilos.
kilos. That's a lot.
At
That's a lot.
least, at least. So the dramatic weight loss, because again, I was maybe consuming, if I was consuming 1,000 calories, like if, maybe
Mm,
500. And it was
mm,
just a lot of drinking water, and it was a lot of eating, vegetables, raw vegetables, that were cheap, and sometimes
mm.
little tins of, microwavable meals with
Yeah.
rice or something, whatever, and, that was it. And I did that for at least anywhere from at least half of the time I was there. So, yeah,
Mm,
you can't, nobody can live off of staff pay. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And it is very much like an indentured servitude type of contract, because the other thing is, if you are a staff member, you're a staff member first. So let's say you get a job, which they call moonlighting,
yeah.
and your moonlighting job provides more money, more opportunity, and you start to lean towards that, you can get in
Mm,
trouble and you're told to leave your moonlighting job or get another moonlighting job, which is why most Scientologists work with Scientologists as moonlighting gigs, because
yeah.
they know, okay, we're not, even though you're getting a lot of money from us, you're still a staff member at heart. And it's so unrealistic and also
Mm,
very toxic and very abusive. But that again, that's the same thing that I didn't know when I was a public. It was back to that whole culture thing, that of that shift between being a public where you are pretty revered because you're paying money,
mm,
and then the staff
mm,
member, which is staff members are right at the bottom. Sea Org
mm,
members on top, publics in the middle, and staff member right at the bottom. And so you're really treated terribly, and you're
yeah.
expected to do all these things that are very unrealistic. Again, like, working for Scientology and getting 14, 15 euros a week, and then going out and working again another job, but you can't
Mm,
really quit Scientology to work for that other job. It's so crazy. And I hate to
yeah.
use that word, but it is,
Yeah.
it's really just all over the place.
Yeah. Call it what it is. Did you feel like you
Yeah.
got like a rude awakening at that moment, or were you already so conditioned to the treatment that you did not question it?
Well, here's the thing. When I left Berlin, I came back to Canada for a couple weeks, and then they had transferred me to San Francisco. And when I got to San Francisco, that's when I was like, oh, okay, well, when you're in Scientology, and especially when you're on staff, you're really,
Mm,
really in an echo chamber, because the org is the org. So I remember having conversations with people who are like, the Berlin org is terrible, the Berlin org is horrible, the executives are terrible, but you don't think about other orgs. So then I went to San Francisco, and it was the same problems. And also in the Northern
mm,
California region, there were a bunch of different organizations that I we would go see. So there's one called Los Gatos,
mm,
Stevens Creek, and then San Francisco and Mountain View. And we would go to these different orgs, right? Like on the weekend, at least I had my weekends at least. And I would go with other staff members, and it was like the same stuff. There's nobody there. Nobody's interested. The people are overworked. The people are making $5 a week or $10 a week. And that's really what it kind of hit me like, oh, it's not just Berlin. This is an entire
Mm,
Church of Scientology systematic thing or systemic thing where
mm,
the same cultural, the same pressure, the same lack of money, the same everything ripples. It's not just
mm.
Berlin. And a lot of people don't really know that. They kind of think it's only one org is bad, one org is bad. If one org's
Yes.
abusive, one org's abusive. One executive director is a horrible person. They're all, that's the only that only one, you know, uh,
Mm,
ED is bad, but it really ripples out, and
yeah.
that's what gave me the rude awakening of like, oh, okay, now I peek through the curtain and I kind of understand how this thing works,
Mm,
and you're never going to make any money. They give you again, they also give you free courses, right? Like you're supposed to sign here two and a
mm,
half year. They give you free courses, but you're never going to make progress up the bridge. You're always going to be working. It's sort of pointless, like all the little
yeah.
perks that they claim to give you. And so it's again, it's just abusive, really. It's all it is.
Yeah. But that seems to be the consensus that people inside Scientology think it's only their org, it's only themselves that have the doubts and the questions.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah,
like I've been explained, it's only in USA where they have problems. They, if there's something negative, they are very good at deflecting and saying, no, it's only in America that these issues
of course.
prevail. But
Yeah, it's literally everywhere because it's the same system.
yeah.
Like, it's the same system, it's the same culture.
Mm,
It's not like if you go to another country, like if you're part of another religion and you go to another church service or whatever in another country where
mm,
there's actually a different culture, you're gonna find patterns that are similar, but you're gonna find a lot of stuff that's different culturally. It's not like that in
exactly.
Scientology. The
No.
culture is Hubbard. So whatever
Mm,
Hubbard said and Hubbard did and Hubbard wanted, people follow that so strictly that they don't have their own independent culture, or they don't have their own
mm,
independent anything. It's all just Hubbard, Hubbard, Hubbard. And it's kind of weird because
mm,
most of the times you can go outside to another continent, to another city, to another state or province or whatever, and find some differentiation of something. But in Scientology, it's so uniformed and militant that
mm,
it's all the same. And a public experience will be very similar to all public experiences because you get your butt kissed, and then if you go down to staff, you're going to have the same experience because you're on the bottom of the totem pole, and it doesn't let up. It's exactly the same. So that also was kind of a shock to me too, growing up in Canada, very multicultural place. So I
mm,
was able to experience different parts of life. And when I moved, for example, when I moved to Poland, that was the first time when everything was very homogeneous because in Poland, people are 98% Catholic. They celebrate the
mm,
same holidays. Everyone does the
yes.
same thing for Christmas. Everyone does the same thing. I was like, this is odd, right?
Mm,
That's again, the homogeneity is kind of what Scientology is like. And so it was odd for me because I was always used to the different diversity. And
yeah.
it's just strange. Also, in America and other countries are very similar, but there are these homogeneous, kind of cultures that is just kind of odd. So it was
Mm,
just kind of, again, a bit of a wake up call of like, oh, okay, well, things are different in different places.
yeah.
We're not all the same.
Yeah. So you were working in accounting or the finance department in Germany. How was it going
Oh,
for Scientology in 2007 uh, when they opened their new ideal org there? And
yeah. Well, the first year, so they opened the org officially in January,
mm-hmm,
and for the first couple months, apparently they did quite well, at least for the first month. So
mm,
they did make a lot of money.
mm,
They had about 140 staff members, which was very high.
that sounds extreme.
However, by the time I got there, yeah, by the time I got there, it's about 120, and by the time I left, there's about 80.
Okay.
And I could talk about that,
Yeah.
the disappearing staff members, but in the same time, during the summer of 2007, we did have a couple of really high weeks of gross income were over 100,000 euros.
Okay.
So those were pretty good, but for the most part, it kept getting worse. So, you
Okay.
open org, everyone's there, visitors are there, they're buying stuff, people are there, they're
Mm.
buying stuff. It seems really good, and then it just sort of tanked. And that's exactly what happens with every org. They'll get a little high when they open,
Mm.
and they might have a lot of people join staff. They might have a lot of people buy stuff, but then within a month or two, it went down, down, down. And then for us, probably by the end of the summer, by around
Mm.
September, that 100,000 that we had a couple times was maybe 60,000 euros or 50,000 euros. Like that happened fairly
Mm.
often, and then it was going below 20. And so for staff pay, it just means your staff pay keeps getting reduced. So when it
Mm.
was 100,000, I was getting maybe 80, 85 euros a week. And then if it's 50, I was getting, maybe sometimes maybe 40 to 60
Mm.
euros a week. And then if it's under 25, I was getting 10, 12, maybe 15. So
Yeah.
the gross income 100%, which is on a weekly basis,
Mm.
affects everything. It affects staff pay. It affects having to pay bills, and that's the construct of L. Ron Hubbard's admin tech, which is just
Mm.
absurdly ridiculous. Really does not make a business better. Again, it makes it more bureaucratic, and to me, it's just an awful, awful way of doing business. So again, I would say just like everything starts off fine and then collapses. And now I don't even know how many staff members there would be there, but there's certainly not, the 120 or whatever that we had. I'd say maybe 10, 15 if they were lucky in a huge, big building somewhere in Charlottenburg. So it's
Mm.
just very, I don't know, it's very disillusioning to see those things happen before your eyes. But certainly all these ideal orgs, it was a horrible, horrible policy. That's what
Yeah.
I can say from the inside.
Okay. And who has access, for example, to the information regarding revenue? Who knows how much money is being made? Is that widely reported inside the org, so
I
everyone
mean,
is aware?
for the most part. So at so you may have heard where Thursday at 2 o'clock, every Thursday at 2 o'clock,
Yes.
depending on where you are. So it changes
Yeah.
depending on the time zone, right? But at 2 p.m. or 1400 hours on Thursdays, they close the week and they calculate the statistics. Then Thursday evening, there's usually a mandatory staff meeting, and they present like a PowerPoint presentation on all the
Mm-hmm.
statistics, and they will present what their gross income was,
Mm.
and that's only gross income. There's one other revenue source which comes from Treasury, which is called the
Mm.
Department of Income, and they're two separate things, and it's absurd because if you pay I'll just be brief here. But if you pay
Mm.
for a course or a service to the Div 2, to the Div 2 registrar, it goes to gross income, which then goes to staff pay. But if you
Mm.
pay this for the same thing to the director of income, it goes towards a totally other account that pays for the utilities, which is so stupid. Why it's split like that, it doesn't make any sense. But
Mm.
there's two sources. So there's the income, and then there's the gross income. I forget what they call the treasury income, let's just call it, and then the gross income. And so, yeah, we
Mm.
we get those statistics. So when we were making 100,000, 110,000, happened maybe 2 or 3 times in the summer of
Mm.
2005, we all knew. And then when we make 10 or 15, we all knew. So, at least in that case, how transparent, by the way, is that? I have no idea, right? But that's at least something where they kind of give the illusion of transparency. And then
Okay.
from there, you can calculate, like in Treasury, then we have to calculate how much people get paid. I would get a printout, and then I would literally give people, notes and coins or bills and coins in some cases,
Mm.
because it was like specific. Like if somebody got 9 euros and 63 cents, I gave them 9 euros and 63 cents. You know what I mean? So it
Mm.
was it was a lot like that. And
Okay.
then of course there were other things. that were just I did, but I didn't understand. Put it that way. I did a lot of things that I didn't understand in the
Okay.
org.
Yeah. And you got to visit was it the advanced organization in Denmark that you visited?
Copenhagen. I went to the CLO, which I think is actually in the same building. I'm not, or maybe it's in a different building. But the CLO is the Continental Liaison Office.
Which
So
year was
I
this?
2000 and December of 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So I
December
think it's
2007.
since then it has been moved. They bought a big property outside Copenhagen. But yeah, at that
Okay.
time, yeah, at that
I
time,
think at that time it was actually that's the advanced organization, which is in like kind of like the city center, I think. It's like in
yes,
the city of
yes,
Copenhagen, right?
yes.
So from what I recall, and I told this to Aaron a couple of years ago, so
Mm,
again, I'll be brief here because it's a longer story. But
yeah.
they wanted me to deliver money that they had made through the IAS, locally through the IAS, the International Association of Scientologists. And every
Mm,
month they were sending people from Berlin to Copenhagen to drop off money, to do money runs. And I guess the time before I did it, the people got caught or something at the border and they were given a talking. So they said,
yeah.
okay, well, Mark has a Canadian passport, he'll do it. So they paid for my bus ticket from Berlin to Copenhagen, and
Mm,
I basically spent no time there. I just had a very early morning 6 a.m. bus ticket. It takes 6, 7 hours or something or more. I can't remember how long it takes
yeah.
to get to
Yeah.
Copenhagen, but I got to Copenhagen, dropped off the money, and then went back.
And how
So I
much
was
money
maybe
did
in
you have with
Copenhagen
you?
for an hour. So that's the thing. I never counted it, but I'm pretty sure it was a few thousand euros,
Okay.
which they put in a paper bag. I put it in my backpack, and I went up there and came
Yeah.
back. You know, it was like it was crazy, and that was specifically because there's this International Association of Scientologists, and there's an
Mm,
office in every Church of Scientology. So that was the
mm,
money that had been donated that was going to Copenhagen. So then they could give people memberships and things like this. But I want to say there's probably maybe 4 or 5 thousand euros in that brown paper bag. There could have been more. I just was very nervous and didn't want to count how much there was in there. But I'm pretty sure it was at least a few thousand. And because the sign, Germany and Denmark have had an open border for a long time, although
mm.
there were still German and Danish like customs. It wasn't really customs, but I don't even know how you would say it. Like,
Like a
'cause I can't
freeway where
remember
you
now.
have kind of like you have
Yeah,
border control stations, but they are not
that's
manned
right.
normally. Yeah. So
Yeah, and if they were, I don't remember now because when the bus goes up to Rostock, and then you have to take the ferry over to the island where
mm,
Copenhagen is. And I think that between there were like police officers or customs that were Danish and German, but I don't remember now if they even. I think actually I did think they checked the passports, and I think they do that because if you were foreign, so they checked my passport, for example. I do remember
mm,
that because I brought it,
okay.
my Canadian
Yeah.
passport. But then they looked at it and they said whatever. So that's why they
Mm,
were doing that. So I guess apparently someone who was doing it before me got flagged, which I guess is a possibility. I don't know the
yeah.
circumstances. I don't know, but that was the idea. So, and I was in Copenhagen for 1 hour, and it was kind of, for me, it was a really cold and windy day, and I didn't really
Mm,
like it. But
yeah.
it was a nice city. I wanted to see more, but it was literally like that was it. And they actually did pay for food and my two bus tickets, there and
Yeah.
back. So that was fine. And
Yeah.
I hated working for the org, so I was gone for 2 days. So
Yeah.
it was
But
not
I
bad.
would quite confidently say that you were part of a money laundering operation because
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
as a private person, you are, I think, within European Union, you're allowed to bring 10,000 euros in cash.
That's right. That's
But
right.
the bringing Scientology's money uh,
Mhm.
to Denmark from Germany is a whole other story. I am wondering if
Yeah.
if police would still be today interested about this fact. It's quite many
Well,
years
I
ago
mean,
now.
That's what we were doing. Yeah, exactly. And, yeah, I mean, who knows? Yeah,
Mm,
my mom asked me when I came home and told her the story, she said, "Why didn't you just, you know, go to the airport, buy a flight, and just come home?" And I said, "Well,
mm,
I was too inside." I was like, "Ah, if I did that, I get a freeloader bill," which I got anyway. And I was, I was for the org is more important. Like I was a good Scientologist, but
mm.
I could have taken that money, gone anywhere in Europe, stayed in a five-star hotel for a night, and hightailed it out the next morning. They wouldn't have known because I'd paying cash, but I was too in my own head with Scientology and their punishments.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was at least somewhere probably around 5,000 euros. I'm pretty sure, because again, a lot of the money stuff gets back to treasury, and so
yeah,
I'm almost certain there was at least that amount of money in there,
yeah,
that
yeah.
paper bag.
This is yeah. Scientology. When people ask what is Scientology, what is the issue with Scientology, it's such a multifaceted thing. I always try to think what is the most important information to give forward, for example, to the public who is not aware what's wrong with Scientology. When I talk about or when I think about Scientology itself, of course, the emotional, physical abuse of people is something that you cannot measure in money. Unfortunately, authorities are mainly interested when it comes to money.
Yeah,
So definitely, if anyone is at all aware of any more recent or fresh cases of this type of money transfers, please get in touch with me or go straight to the police and report them, because
yeah,
I have no doubt that even today, especially because of the new anti-money laundering actions
right.
in European Union, it's very difficult for them to move assets from country to country and cash. So
Yeah,
yeah,
especially because in Germany, there's not many banks that will do business with Scientology.
yeah,
And in Denmark, I think they're a little bit more open,
mm,
but at the same time, I'm sure that somebody explained it to me at the
mm,
time, but it's just been a long time. But why
yeah.
you can't just do a wire transfer, and there was obviously some reason why they couldn't do it. It was
You will need to
probably a legal
explain it.
reason.
You will need to
Yeah,
explain it.
exactly.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, and you just do it. You just know it's better because this reason or that, whatever.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah. Did you do this trip only once or more than once?
just one time.
Okay,
Just one time, yeah. Yeah, I
okay.
don't know why I didn't do it again. I wanted to because, again, I was away from the org for a day. For
Yeah,
me, it was like a mini vacation,
yeah. You could sleep
and they gave
in
me,
the
like,
bus.
yeah, I slept exactly. I slept in the bus, it was comfortable, it was
Yeah,
beautiful on the ferry. I mean, the food is expensive, but they gave me, like, 50 euros to eat and stuff, which I was like, it came from the Sea Org, that's why.
yeah,
I was like, 50 euros. Like, I went to 7-Eleven, I bought some stuff. I think I
mm,
went to like some dinner place and got some food. Like, it was great. I wanted to do more of it, but
yeah,
plus, again, Denmark is beautiful. I wanted to walk around Copenhagen more and see some stuff. And the Hans Christian Andersen Museum, I remember walking by and being like, oh, I really want to go in here. And, you
yeah,
know, so it is, right? Of
yeah. I have a couple of questions here. I'm thinking before we go way
course.
too much further up in your story. But the Rico is asking, did your family do any research on Scientology while you were in, and how
I think
thrilled were they when you left?
Well, I can only speak with my mom. I'm sure she
Mm,
did because, when I joined Scientology, it was the summer that, infamously Tom Cruise, jumped on Oprah's couch and stuff, and so I'm sure my mom Googled and read books and read articles. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure about my dad. I have no idea. He's passed away now, so I'm not sure.
yeah,
But, when I left, again, it was more I had done a lot more research because, of course, I had seen some stuff, and one of the first things that I looked into was, Jason Begay did, like, a 2.5-hour interview, with, Tori Christman and Mark Bunker,
yeah,
when he used to live in home in Los Angeles, so I did a lot of research after the fact to confirm that things were not the way it was like a facade. Things were on the outside, things were not the same as on the inside. So, but as far as my family is concerned, again, I think it was just mostly through popular media and popular culture that they had like a, and again, this friend of my dad who they knew, who had been in Scientology, what their extent
Mm.
was or their affiliation, I don't know. But it's in the media. It's a cult or it's a destructive group or it takes your money and this kind of stuff. So it's hard to ignore those things. And I think my parents were probably just aware of those things,
Yeah.
more than anything.
Okay. Amy is also wondering, when did you sleep with the working hours and having to do moonlighting and so forth?
Well, I mean, I slept very few hours. I did sleep. I
Mm.
worked 9 in the morning until at least 11 or 12. I lived a 5-minute walk from the org. I also had to do night watch a lot. So night watch starts at 10:30 and ends the next day at 9:30. And I
Is that
did
like
that a lot.
security in the building or
And
yeah?
you have to be up and awake. And there's
Mm.
no schedule. They'll just come to you one day and say you have to do this, and you just do it. No overtime also. So yeah, I mean, I slept, but I had an apartment. I had a small bed, and I just
Mm.
did what I could, and it was tough.
Mm.
But living 5 minute walk from the org was also kind of a good thing because
Mm.
I could always easily go home if I needed to. Or sometimes people sleep in the org. I mean, people sleep all the time. They lock the door to their office. They keep the lights on, and they put their heads down and go to sleep. I mean, it's so many hours. People
Mm.
can't work that hours.
Yeah.
It's physically impossible, and so that happens a lot too. And it also happens where people will not will rather than going home, a lot of
Mm.
people will just sleep somewhere in the org overnight. There were
Yeah.
showers at the org as well. So people will do that. They'll
Yeah.
spend their life at the org.
Yeah. And if you have happen to have 6 or 7 3 hours in every day, you will use it on sleeping, and that's excellent way to isolate you from the rest of the society as well. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I was telling someone recently, and I forget whom it was, but where I lived in Berlin, so I lived on the corner of Autosraile, and the street that went north is called um, which was the street I came from was or lived on was called Kauerstrasse, but the street below is called Leibnizstrasse. And when I went back to Berlin in 2018, I had never crossed the street to visit that neighborhood. That was literally just a block south because all
Yeah.
I did was go from Kauerstrasse to Ottersreude. I actually crossed the street and walked down Leibnizstrasse to a big shopping district. And I was like, I can't believe this. There's a life here. This city is huge, first of all, but this particular place in Charlottenburg, and I had never even been to the palace, which is just west of there, 1 or 2 stops on the U-Bahn. I'd never been there, never seen it, never done anything. My life
Yeah.
was my apartment and the org, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have my friend has a similar experience from Sea Org when he went from Denmark to Los Angeles for 2 months. He was also only going
Mhm.
between the big blue building and where he was living, and he was only allowed to go on this Scientology side of the sidewalk on
That's right.
yeah. So it was even limited, which side of the street where you were allowed to walk on. Lara is asking,
Unbelievable.
when did you leave staff and Scientology? So you had some visa issues in Germany, so you were moved to San
So
Francisco.
when I got to Berlin, Germany,
Hmm.
I did not have a visa, which you can live or do anything for about 90 days. When you're a Canadian citizen, you come to a EU country about 90 days where you don't need a visa. So then when
Hmm.
those 90 days were coming to an end, I ended up getting a residence permit for a year. But
Hmm.
eventually I stayed because thankfully I actually booked a return flight, just randomly booked a return flight 9 months after, because I thought, oh, 9 months is enough to come home and to whatever.
Mm,
So there's a whole story there because there was a lot of people who were trying to let to for me to stay, and
mm,
like, immigration and illegal issues were rampant in Berlin. There were lots of people working without visas and without
mm,
permission, and teenagers working without schooling and stuff like this. It was horrendous. But eventually, I was able to go to San Francisco because of another gentleman who's quite infamous. His name is Rex Fowler. Rex
mm-hmm.
Fowler is currently incarcerated for first-degree murder of his business partner. But I was friends
Okay.
with Rex Fowler, and he knew someone in San Francisco who said, "Okay, well, we'll have him in San Francisco." And that was the only thing that I could have done to not get a freeloader bill, was
Mm.
to go to San Francisco and to work off my contract. So I went there, and then to
Can I
finish
interrupt you
how,
for one? Sorry, I want to
of course,
interrupt you for 1 second because I have always understood that the freeloader bill is only for SEOC members, but is it if you don't uphold to your two and a
no,
half year contract?
staff, staff as well, every contract. So if you break a two and a
Okay,
half or a 5-year staff contract, you get a freeloader, and then if you break a COR contract, you get a freeloader. So
okay,
yes,
okay,
absolutely for staff members, and
okay. So
that's
you
in
had to
like
work the
the
two
staff
and a
status.
half years to complete your
Mhm.
contract. Okay.
And again, one of these things, I know it sounds strange for people, like, why didn't you just leave? The freeloader bill means that if you break a contract, because you get free studying, even if the
Mm,
studying is for your own position, like you
mm,
get 3 staff status courses, you get a mini hat and a full hat. I was able to get the 3 staff status courses and the mini hat, and I owe like the Church of Scientology in San Francisco or whatever, around like 5,000, $6,000 because of
yeah,
all the bunch of stuff with other courses with I had method one word clearing. I also had security checks. So they all add up. And I didn't want to leave with a debt because if you don't pay back that debt, you are forbidden from taking any Scientology courses or services, which again is abusive and disgusting. So
yeah.
they transferred me. I said, "Look, I can't stay here in Berlin. I have this flight going home. Just let me go home and whatever." It was like
Mm,
pulling teeth. People were writing reports on me. It was horrendous. But when I went to San Francisco, and this is what really started to get me into that like incompetency of like just the whole place is just ridiculous.
yeah.
So when you are in Scientology, you have folders called CF folders and also pre-clear folders. So my
Mm,
pre-clear folders went from Toronto to Berlin and then Berlin to San Francisco. And long story short on that one, they were case supervised by a guy named Jerry Latch. And he decided that because I had some loose affiliations with some anti-Scientology groups online when I was a teenager, to which I don't recall, I
mm,
wasn't qualified to be a staff member, but I had already been a staff member for a year, and
yeah.
had the people in Berlin found that out, I wouldn't have been able to join staff. So it
Mm,
was like this cluster F bomb of
yeah.
this stupidity and insanity. And
Mm,
that's when I went to Los Angeles, tried to get some help, didn't get any help, and decided I was going to leave in May of 2005. So I know it's a lot, but it's a lot of back and forth and okay, this point, this point, this point. But that's kind of how it that's how it ended for me, was the
yeah.
fact that I came
2008,
to
right?
the
Not
realization.
2005.
It was 2008. Yeah, excuse me. May
Yeah,
of 2008 is when I left.
yeah.
So
And did you,
it was that idea.
yeah,
I
did
might
you
have said five, but
formally
the time had to
announce
look.
you were leaving, or how did that
No,
happen?
at the time, there was no way to do that. I when I took my flight from Los Angeles to Toronto, I was decompressing, and I
Mm-hmm.
had a couple days. I was actually in Los Angeles for about 4 or 5 days. Ironically, I stayed in a house right across from Asho, who
Mm,
was owned by a Scientologist, and I just had some time. Like, I just had time to decompress, and I just went around to different parts of Los Angeles, which I really liked it. It was really, it was really nice. And by the time I took my flight back to Toronto, by the time I landed, I had basically said to my mom, like, this is what's been happening. I don't think I'm interested anymore. And then I started to decompress. That did
Mm,
take a while, you know. By the time I was really mentally out, and I had a lot of survivor's guilt.
mm,
I had a lot of issues, like, mental health issues going on. But at the same
mm,
time, I was able to be like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. They used me. They trafficked my labor into Berlin. I was really never supposed to even join staff on there, but they used me. They didn't want to leave. They were
yeah.
doing illegal things. And then I go to San Francisco and they just kicked me out with no concern after what I had just been through. And I thought, you know what, forget it. I'm not afraid anymore. At that
Mm,
time, my fear had just dissipated. And I just realized, like, I had gotten paid less than €1,000 in an entire year.
yeah.
Like, for what I worked 90 hours a week for 9 months. I
Yeah.
should have made 50, €100,000 more.
Yeah.
And, that doesn't even, by the way, that doesn't even account, the night watch, which I
Yes.
probably done 20, 25 times, and that's another 12 hours. So I should have
Yeah.
been paid tens of thousands of euros and had no problem, but I got paid
Mm,
less than 1,000, okay? And again, I was mentally out, and although there was some months in there of decompressing and
mm,
researching and looking at other people's stories, by the end of the year, by the end of 2008, I was completely done, and I was on forums talking about my experience, and then later I would use my name, like, not for a couple years after, because I used a couple
mm,
pseudonyms, but then after that, I was like, "Okay, this is me, my name is Mark Turi, and, this is my story." And that's
yeah.
been going on for at least 10 years.
Yeah. Sophia is saying that you should you
Yeah,
could have sued for back pay, and I think that's the issue with Scientology. The kind
not
of
that
like the
easy.
decompressing from Scientology and actually realizing in the end what the hell happened. It takes so long
Yeah.
time. When do you think it finally sank into your head what you had been going through? How do you think you're still in recovery after leaving
Yeah, of
Scientology?
course.
Yeah,
I'll be in recovery my whole life because it fucks with your trust issues. It screws with your family dynamics. You put off things, you stop
yeah,
experiencing things. It's just so much nonsense and just so much bombardment of just horrible, horrible things that I know. I mean, listen, I was in for 3 years. I only have
mm,
the utmost sympathy for people who are in for 30 years. And, if they leave, they might run into certain issues with people, and online it might look like some people are still in mentally. You have to give
mm,
people a bit of leeway there, because I'm in for 3 years. I think I'm doing better now than I have in the
mm,
past, but, like, because of these stupid TR communication drills, I know that
mm,
sometimes the way I talk to people is really aggressive and very rude, and people don't like that, but I'm trying so hard for the past 20 years to not do that, but it's still with me. So I feel sometimes in the past few years, if I've gone to meetup groups or discussion groups and I feel like I'm backed into the wall, my TRs go in. I haven't done TRs in 20 years, but, like,
mm,
I know that there's still something there that I would like to change, and it's really,
mm,
really, really hard. I see aspects of my personality where I'm like, "That's a leftover from Scientology," and that
yeah,
might be negative, and I'm trying to think how I cannot do that, but I don't know how to not do that.
yeah,
So I'm trying, but I just need another way, and so I've been reading a lot in the past few years about different school different schools of thought and communications, right?
yeah,
How, L. Ron Hubbard, whatever, really what he does is he isolates your communication. So you can talk to Scientologists and that's all, but you don't really talk to other people. Other people will find you rude, or they'll find you aggressive, they'll find you annoying, very standoffish. So I've been trying very hard to do that, but it is hard. And I
yeah,
only took the successor communication again one time in the
mm,
summer 20 years ago,
yeah,
and for some reason it still resonates in my brain, and I
mm,
want it gone. I want to go back to the way I was before. You
Mm,
know what I mean? But it's something that I'm living with, and I'm trying hard. I'm trying my best, and that's all I can do right now is understand when something annoys me, and when I'm doubling down and being very aggressive, to be like, okay, don't do that. Like, that's your Scientology leftover brain. Take it easy. Don't point at people and don't stare at people and tell them, you
mm.
know, horrible things. Like, just don't
Yeah,
call them an idiot. Just relax. You know what I mean? Like, don't bull bait. And
yeah,
I'm just trying. That's all
yeah,
I can do.
yeah. Amy M is suggesting here that you could also get in touch with Andrews and Thornton because they are taking clients also outside the, what is it called now when a crime gets old? Now I forgot the term.
Yeah, what
What
is
is
that term? Not
it?
jurisdiction.
No, it's
But I speak 3 languages now, so I can even barely speak English.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
But if it's a cross border, for
a
example,
statute of limitations.
statute of limitation, yes. So apparently, statute of limitations do not necessarily count if you have been trafficked from another state or internationally. So you should definitely
Yeah.
look into the page that I shared before called Victims Have
Yes, send
Voices.
some links. Yeah, send some links and
Yeah,
stuff. I'll look
absolutely,
into it.
absolutely. Uh, then I wanted to ask you. I'm sure we're gonna have another conversation at another point,
Sure.
but regarding your channel, is it
Yeah.
solely anti-Scientology topic
No,
that?
no. I talk
No.
So what I do, it's at Mark Turi 123. So just
My mouse can share it
MarkTuri
in the chat.
123. The thing with Scientology, I talk about my Scientology experience,
Mm-hmm.
but because I just graduated from a master's program where I studied history. So now I
Yeah.
have my master's degree, and I've been interested in a lot of different academic subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just a place for me to talk about different things. I do talk about Scientology. I did a video a few months ago on what a Scientology reform would look like. And my
Mm-hmm.
conclusion is that it would look probably more like the independents, even though I don't support the independents, because
Mm.
I think Hubbard was the problem. But again, these are all opinions and
Mm.
philosophical perspectives.
Yeah.
But I looked at those kinds of things. But I
Mm.
look at a lot of things that just interest me. So we've been doing a lot of things on philosophy, history, yesterday evening, a, a couple years ago, I was on a podcast show with like Marilyn Honig and other people, and Joe DiCeppo and a few of my other friends. And
Mm-hmm.
a couple years ago, I did a presentation called My History with History, where I just talked about why I'm interested in history, what I've learned, and
Mm.
about my family, because a lot of my family came to Canada as refugees. So they escaped a lot of wars. And I grew up listening to all these kinds of stories about
Mm.
growing up in the Ottoman Empire and under communist Hungary and whatever. So I do a lot of those kinds of things, and we did that just last night. So we talk about religion, philosophy, theology, psychology, pop culture. I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, so I've talked about Star Trek Deep Space Nine a whole bunch. So if you like that show, I love it. So if you like that show, you'll like it there.
Yeah.
And I really try to make it more of an education channel and just
Mm.
whatever interests me. And a lot of stuff, I don't know if you ever remember Doug Scott Kramer.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Doug, yeah, Dazed but Not Confused. I did about 7 videos with him about different experiences that I had with other religions and Scientology and whatever. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to start moving forward with some of those things because
Okay.
they were a lot of interest for them. So I like to think that I'm doing an education channel which mixes the Scientology criticism with other academic subjects
Yeah.
and just try to share my knowledge. And yeah, I'm try not to be judgmental. I tell people, even if you don't agree with my point of view or anything, you're
Mm.
still welcome to come to my channel, discuss it. If I have a fact that's wrong, talk about it. Just as long as everyone is decent and nice, and doesn't use bad words, everyone's welcome. So that the point is just for me to share some of my interests.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most of the people that are in the community of people that have left Scientology or are
Right.
against the Scientology's abuses. The main focus is against the abuses. If you want to,
Exactly.
you think this belief system is useful for you, then go ahead. But I'm not sure what is left of Scientology after all the abuses are taken out of it. So that's a question for another day.
Yeah. My opinion is when I took a philosophy class once, they said you can break things down into intentions, means, and ends. So
Mm,
intentions are one thing, means and ends. So to me, the as long as if someone wants to do Scientology outside the church, it doesn't cost a lot of money, you're not breaking up families, you're not committing fraud. Okay, I think Hubbard was a bad guy. I don't like his system. I'm a trained Dianetics auditor, but I would never audit someone on Dianetics because I think
mm,
it's hypnotism. But you know what? I'm an
mm,
adult, live and let live. I don't have any control over any other people.
exactly.
Just as long as they're
Mm,
not doing what the Church of Scientology is doing abuse wise, then just live your best life and just don't harm people. If you are, then I have a problem. So my problem is mostly with the abuses because I know that I can't control people studying a subject, that other
yeah,
people, some
exactly.
people like and some people don't, regardless of how we feel. It's part of human rights and whatever. But the abuses is where I cross the line. And so if you go and look at the Scientology reform video that I did, then that's something I talk about in detail. So that's just my position. And again, I never had any interest of being an independent, just because I believe it started with Hubbard. But again, these are all debatable issues that we can talk about till the cows come home,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they are what they are.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward
Thank you,
to
Mirjam.
speak to you again. But I just wanted to have a short talk with you first to find out more about your story and how you ended up here. But please, everyone, go and subscribe to Mark's channel. And in roughly about 15 minutes, Bianca will go live with Jamie Mustard. Are you familiar with Jamie Mustard and his story?
Is that Jamie the Wolf? Did he change his
No,
name, or is that someone
no.
else?
So Jamie Mustard is born into Scientology in the Sea Organization in the early 70s, and he has had a
Oh,
very rough upbringing where he was left by his mother at the age of 1 day into care of child nannies,
yeah,
about 14, 15 children per 7-year-old nanny. And he is
that's
actually an
awful.
artist and a writer on his own accord already. This is his memoir, and it's called The
Oh,
Child
wow.
X. So I will definitely send you that link as well.
Send me the link. Send me the link. Yeah. For
Yes,
some reason,
yes.
I thought it was Jamie the Wolf. Forgive me. It's a
Yeah,
completely different person. So,
yeah, completely
but
different. And the book has just come out 4 days ago, so it's really fresh
great.
news. So
That's
thank you,
good.
everyone watching. I'm
Just before I go,
yeah,
I just want to thank Peter Anderson for getting us in contact with each other.
yes, yes, absolutely. And I didn't get to tell anything about myself, but we can do that at another point. But
Next time, because
next
I do
time,
want to know
exactly.
you as well.
Yes, of course. So I hope everyone will go and check out Bianca and Jamie's conversation, and we will for sure talk again together soon. Everyone, have a lovely Sunday. Bye.